This is NHL Wraparound Quick Takes, and it's time to do a little bit of spring cleaning. The Boston Bruins surprised many, 25-26, qualifying as the second wildcard team in the Eastern Conference before being eliminated in 6 games in the opening round by the Buffalo Sabres, actually losing all 3 games at TD Garden, a place where they have the second best winning percentage of any team in the NHL this year at home.
Just goes to show you how different the playoffs are, right? You can do marvelous things during the regular season. You can beat your upcoming playoff opponent all 4 times during the regular season. Doesn't mean you're going to do that in the playoffs.
But let's circle back with this team, because the expectations for this past season for the Bruins was pretty low, because in 24-25, they tied with Philadelphia for the lowest point total in the Eastern Conference. Head coach Jim Montgomery was replaced after 20 games, with Joe Sacco taking over for the rest of the season. They scored the fewest amount of goals in the East, 222. They were tied for the worst goal differential in the conference at -50. Both of their special teams were 29th. Jeremy Swayman had the worst goals against and save percentage of his career. And we remember that he had a contract dispute heading into that season. And the club was 26th in goals against average. On top of that, longtime star Brad Marchand was dealt to Florida at the deadline. And besides David Pastrnak, scored 43 goals, and Morgan Geekie, who had 33, only 4 other players on the roster had more than 10 goals, and none more than 17, and that was Elias Lindholm. You toss in the offseason acquisitions of Victor Arvidsson, a trade from Edmonton after a disappointing season, and signings of players such as Tanner Jeannot and Sean Kuraly, who was starting a second stint with the Bruins. There wasn't a lot of reason for optimism here. Plus, the Bruins were bringing in a man who had never been a head coach behind an NHL bench in Marco Stern.
You look at this in the summertime and you say, how could these guys possibly be better? This is going to be Pastrnak and a bunch of guys with Bruin jerseys on. But that was not to be. They were going to end up being a lot better than we thought.
Sturm hired on June 5th and had a reputation of being strong in player development and a strong defensive coach. And sure enough, the reality of the season, the team moved up to 14th in goals against average. And as noted, a great team at home. They had attitude all over again, Neil. And their offense up 50 more goals than a season ago. And that was without Pastrnak hitting 30, although he did reach 100 points for the 4th consecutive season. Morgan Geekie did reach a career high of 39 goals and 67 points. This despite he had goal droughts of 12 and 17 games during the course of the year. But Pavel Zacha, career high 30 goals, 65 points. Charlie McAvoy, despite having a real bad mouth injury when he was hit by a puck in Montreal, he had a career high 50 assists and 61 points. Arvidsson, who we mentioned before, doubled his point total from a season ago in Edmonton. He went from 27 to 54 points, including 25 goals. The team also got 59 combined goals from Casey Mittelstadt, Fraser Minton, Marat Hustendinov, and Mark Kastelic. And you toss on top of that Jonathan Aspero, who's a defenseman, never played in the NHL before this season, was a plus 30. Mason Lohrei goes from minus 43 to plus 17. And Nikita Zadorov, he's not going to replace Zdeno Chara, but boy, what a presence he had this season.
Oh, he certainly did. And you know what, Vic, as you're going through all this, I'm sort of hearing the Washington Capitals in my ears, because a lot of career years you're mentioning here. And Zadorov did go from just being a guy who looked like he was lost on defense at times. The first year he was in Boston. This year, he had a dominating physical presence, and he was actually very good defensively. And you combine that with the two guys you mentioned, and their defense got better.
One area that kind of stood out on the negative side is even though their power play went to 9th from 29th, their penalty killing was at 24. So a slight improvement, but still in the bottom quarter of the league. And when you take into account that they were the team that was shorthanded the most during the course of the season and only scored 2 shorthanded goals through the entire year, that's something that needs to be cleaned up going into 26-27.
Well, I think the thing that needs to be cleaned up is they've got to take less penalties. They've got to stay on the ice and not be in the penalty box. I mean, it's one thing to play tough and physical. It's another thing to play outside the line and keep putting your team at a disadvantage. And I think Marco Sturm and the Bruins are going to have to figure that out.
And a lot of that also was this newfound attitude with the Bruins. And I don't even think they lost it. I think perhaps maybe this was an adjustment after their heart and soul of the team, Marchand, got down to Florida, and they're now trying to rebuild their identity. But so many of these penalties also were undisciplined, like you said.
Absolutely. And, you know, Don Sweeney, who had been the Boston villain in the summer of 25, now looks pretty good in the summer of 26. Not stellar, but pretty good for the moves that he made last offseason and during the season. So that came around as well.
So now let's look ahead at the work that Don Sweeney has in front of him. He's got 7 picks in the 2026 draft. Team has 3 in the 4th round. Their own, Anaheim's pick, which they acquired in a trade sending Jeffrey VL to the Ducks. And they also had a swap of picks with Tampa Bay ahead of last year's draft. They have none in the 5th round, and that was part of a 2025 deal which sent Charlie Coyle to Colorado and brought back Casey Middlestat. And they also have none in the 6th round, that one going to Vancouver in the Lucas Reichel trade. They will have a full season of high draft pick from a year ago, James Higgins. Only $900,000 in cap space before this resets on the 1st of July. And not a lot in the free agent area in terms of players that need to be addressed. The UFAs, Arvidsson, who had a strong year for them, and Andrew Peak on defense. And their RFAs, the aforementioned Lucas Reichel and defenseman Jordan Harris.
Well, I would think Don Sweeney, after he gets finished with the draft in June, has got to work on getting Victor Arvidsson signed. He had a terrific year. You've already mentioned that earlier, what a good year Arvidsson had coming over from the Oilers. Lucas Reichel and Jordan Harris are restricted free agents, so we can take a little bit more time on that. But the one thing the Bruins have to do is inject youth into this lineup. They're going to do it with James Higgins from Long Island, a Long Island native, didn't come from the Islanders. They're going to do that with him, but they've got to keep putting some youth into this lineup, because is this team sustainable in 26-27 because of the career years you've had and the ages of the team? So that's where you've got to start to inject youth along with the veterans, hope that you can still stay in a playoff position, and try to do what some teams have tried and didn't really work, is stay competitive while you rebuild the team.
You had mentioned the Washington Capitals earlier in this breakdown, and we saw how many players on the Caps had career years in 24-25 and then had a drop-off this year, and the Caps missed the playoffs. And the team that we have kind of modeled the Bruins with for this year, and also put that cautionary note because they had a lot of players with career years this year, is the Pittsburgh Penguins. You see the same similarity?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that they got some overachievers on Boston. So did Pittsburgh. And I think a lot of the, not a lot, but a number of the players that Don Sweeney picked up and injected into this lineup had really good years. I don't know if they're sustainable or not. For example, he looks like a genius signing Morgan Geekie to a new contract a couple of years ago. Now he gets almost 40 goals this season. Looks like he can keep going with that. Pavel Zacha had a terrific year. Boy, he was good. And Charlie McAvoy is not old, and he keeps getting better. So you've got to think you're going to keep getting it from him. After that, you just got to keep making improvements in the lineup throughout the roster.